Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to this Easter Monday. And I'm glad that you're here. And if you're not here, popping up, or even if you're not here right now, you can always watch the recordings. So today we are going to talk about another type of bias, which I find extremely important, which is the maternal bias. You see, I'm not a mother myself, but I know from stories from my clients and students how many situations of biases, of barriers, of glasses they found in their work environment and beyond, because we know by now that and biases don't happen only in the work environment. And the important thing also to know is the bias is not only related to gender, and also that we all need to take action towards bias. Just becoming aware of them is the first step, but action is it needs to be taken. So we have already covered unconscious bias, performance bias, attribution bias, and likability bias. They are very much intertwined, so it's quite difficult really to separate them. But go back to the previous videos this past week. First week of the challenge is gone already, and review the videos. And if you have any questions, by all means, get back to me. And also, over the weekend, I had the pleasure to have a talk here in this space with two of my good colleagues and friends. I can call them friends, who are experts on their field, and they shared their experiences with bias. Like, they have women with a lot of expertise, senior leaders, and they still face bias that comes from outside upon them, or even their own bias, because that is the problem. We all have our own biases, and it's extremely important, especially for us women, that we recognize them, and that we recognize that we are not having a bias against another woman, because we need to support each other. There's a lot of bias put on us already. We don't need to add to that. So let's talk about what exactly is the maternal bias. And then we will go through, I will ask you a few questions to warm you up. And then we watch the video from the leaning experts and with their research on the topic, so you can learn a little bit further. And at the end, as always, we will talk about some real life experiences on biases and how to identify them, and why they happen, why you should care about them, and what you could do to start eradicating them when they show up in your working place or beyond. So, maternal biases. Motherhood triggers false assumptions that women are less committed to their careers and even less competent. So, supporting mothers to contribute and advance in the work environment is key to everyone's well being and success, personal success, team success, company success. Because let, let's be realistic here. When moms are happy, the whole household isn't happy, and therefore the company environment. So let's get started with some icebreakers to warm you up. Question to you here. Women face bias due to their race, sexuality, and other aspects of their identity. So here's my question. Having someone, okay, I go to the full questions here. When hiring, managers believed a woman had children because some kind of parent teacher association coordinator title appeared on their resume, how much less likely was she to be hired? I mentioned this one before, and I'm repeating here because it's extremely important, because it's shocking, the results. Can you guess how much less is the likelihood that a woman is hired when she has anything in her resume indicating that she is a mother or she's part of any association, parenting association? So the answer is 79% less to be hired. Can you believe that? 79% less to be hired. These numbers, guys, I'm not making them up. They come from a 7 years more of research from leading organization together with McKinsey and Company. So this is the true reality we all face right now. And if she was hired, she would be offered an average of 11,000 less in salary. This number comes from in an American, in the US environment. So I don't know exactly what will be the number here in Europe or other parts of the world, but it doesn't really matter. What matters here is the percentage. So it's important for us to be very aware of this maternal bias. Another question. Let me go back here. When parents work from home, how many times more likely are the mothers to be interrupted by their children compared to fathers? So you mother out there, do you have an answer for that? So the answer is 1.5 more times more likely. So if there is someone to blame here, who's to blame? Or not let's not blame, but let's bring the awareness. And for you mother out there, for you woman out there, that you have to learn how to set boundaries with your children and coordinate with your spouse, your partner, if you're working together, if you're working from home, not necessarily together, how you will deal with the children and how you will educate your children to understand that mom and dad needs time to do some work, as they need time to do some of their homework as well. So we can go into that. There's lots of things to do, but that's not the topic. That's not our purpose here today. So I leave this for you to think about it, that sometimes I think mothers feel like they have to be there for their children all the time. And even if I'm not a mother, but I am someone's child. And I have a very, 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 like with big wings mother. So we grew up with a lot of protection around us. So later in life, now she's a grandmother, and she realized that she could have given herself more time for herself, and she didn't need to be all the time there for us. So this is for you to think about it, how you can organize that better in your life. And now let's listen to the video about maternal bias, what they have to say on their studies and what they found out about these bias that affect so many women out there, because the likelihood of women to be mother is more expected than not being mothers like me.
Two quick reminders before I get started. First, people of all genders fall into bias traps, not just men. Second, knowing that unconscious bias exists isn't enough. We need to look for it and commit to take steps to counteract it. Motherhood triggers assumptions that women are less committed to their careers and less competent. It can intensify the performance bias that women already face. As a result, mothers are often given fewer opportunities and held to higher standards than fathers. We fall into the trap of thinking mothers are not as interested in their jobs now that they have kids, so we assume that they don't want that challenging assignment or to go on that big work trip. Because we think they're less committed, we're more likely to penalize them for small mistakes or oversights. Research shows that maternal bias is the strongest kind of gender bias. In one study, when PTA coordinator is added to a woman's resume, she is 79% less likely to be hired. She's half as likely to be promoted, and she's offered an average of $11,000 less in salary. Interestingly, maternal bias also starts early. As soon as women get engaged, they face pushback because we assume they're going to have children. And men face some pushback when they become parents too. Studies show that fathers who take time off for family reasons receive lower performance ratings and experience steeper reductions in future earnings than mothers who do. Now you know how maternal bias works. As a next step, you can use our bias cards to learn specific ways it shows up in the workplace and what to do about it.
So there you go. There you go. It's not an easy one. And even like as mentioned in the video, men also receive low rates on their feedback once they decide to give time for the family. And it's a very difficult situation here because we all work also towards to bring fathers the opportunity to have the paternal leave as well, and so then they can support and participate and engage in the raising of children, but then they also are penalized for that. So there's lots of things that needs to change in our work environment, and start from our leaders understanding, being aware of those bias, not only being aware, but in understanding the importance of tackling them and to fight them and until we will eradicate them, because nobody is benefiting from it. So let's go through some workspace and situations here to discover what we can do when particular situations happen in the workplace. So the first one goes to reviews and promotions. Let me go to the full text now. A colleague recommends a man for promotion over a woman, saying, "I'm not sure about her long-term commitment. She just got engaged and I think she wants to have kids soon." How many have heard that? I know stories of people or women telling me that when they were at the company, especially was in Switzerland when I was living there, they were these ladies were around their 30s, 35s, and they were approached by their managers, by their leaders, and they were told, they were suggested, advised to reconsider their career because it was about time them to start thinking about family. And if they already had a family, they would suggest them to go home and stay there and look after the family, which creates a lot of problems and guilty feelings to these young mothers, because if you start receiving all this information, those messages around you, you start doubting. It's very difficult to fight for developing a career when you don't have support by anyone around you from work, even like in schools. And I know from fact in schools in Switzerland, many women I know suffered some underlying comments by the teacher, by this one looking after their children, because when the child had a problem at school, the teacher would say something like, well, if you were home to look after your child, maybe probably this child wouldn't have this problem. So this is a very nasty comment to give, right? So this was my own view, and let's go back to the research and say why it matters. When co-workers make assumptions about a woman's commitment to work based on what's happening in her personal life, because it's an assumption, you don't know exactly someone's personal life, it unfairly limits her opportunities. and could cause your company to miss out on a highly committed candidate. It's also illegal in many states to consider persons' marital or parental status as a factor in promotions. Also, in some countries, age is also considered illegal to consider the person's candidate age to accept, to hire, etc. But we know there's ways that you can, as I said, you can do it around. It's illegal, but and they keep doing it in an indirect way. And this can come in forms of microaggressions, which is the next topic I will talk this week. So, what you can do, suggest to your colleague that women should decide for themselves whether or not they want to take on new challenges at work. If you're feeling bold, if you're feeling bold, you can also point out the double standard. It's hard to imagine that we'd say that about a man who recently got engaged. And also, it's something like this, if you are assuming something like that, if you have the feeling, again, I repeat what I said before, get the facts, go through this woman performance and see how she has performed before, and then you have some information to analyze and kind of try to foresee her performance in the future and in certain challenge, because people have certain behaviors. But still, if it's just your feeling, no, that is incorrect. That is a bias. Why it happens? When women get engaged or married, studies show that they start to experience maternal bias. People, consciously or unconsciously, start to question their competence and commitment based on the mistaken belief that women can't be fully present at work if they have family responsibilities at home. There is something here for my dear women out there, dear mothers out there. It's all about your self leadership and your self leadership at home as well. Because I do know that some women get, I was like divided with a like tight heart because they have responsibilities with their children, because these responsibilities are not well balanced with their partner's spouse in the first place. So they care all the household and parenting responsibilities. So of course they are stressed at work. So here is something that you have to be attentive to. But we know from fact that there's so many women out there, mothers, and they are excellent leaders, outperforming, and etc. So we have to be careful not to fall into this maternal bias that comes from assumptions. The next one, it's about hiring. Let's see. Your colleague advocates for a job candidate with no gap in her resume over another with a gap from when she was a full-time mom. It's a tricky one because, of course, I know, you know, many women who decide to have a break because they want to be with their child from a number of years until the child reach certain age, whatever age they define, and then they are going back to work. And I know several women like this, and they went back to the working place fully charged, because also while they're there looking after their child, enjoying these first months, first years, they kept educating themselves. It was not that they were like outside of the world in another planet in a bubble. They were educating themselves too. So when they went back to the workplace to re-engage, reinstate themselves, that's not a big issue. Of course, every time you are going for a new job, you have a learning curve anyways. So something here to be very careful about. Why it matters. Companies that look negatively on job applicants who take time off to raise kids risk missing out on qualified candidates, in particular women. Mothers are more likely than fathers to take time off for childcare, and they face harsher career penalties when they do. So, what can you do when you see that and when you are the person hiring or you hear a colleague making some assumptions about mothers' capabilities, performances, and competence for a position? Push for candidates to be evaluated on their skills and experience without taking into account the time taken off for caregiving. Longer term, recommend that your team uses standardized hiring criteria and apply them consistently to all candidates. That can help ensure you judge everyone by the same yardstick. And one thing here I want to make a comment. Before we talked about that men go for a position without being 100% qualified, that where they go for the 60% when they feel that they have the 60% abilities and skills that are required, they put themselves forward. If you see that, you can put this in the same way. Women being outside taking a break for maternal leave, you can consider yourself, women, that okay, I'm going this time away is my 60% now that I'm going to put forward. And even kept educating myself, but I go for it. So there are a lot of things we have to take into consideration here that can to break those bias, those maternal bias. And why it happens? When a woman becomes a mother, it can make others think that she's less committed to her career, even less competent. As a result, she's often held to higher standards and offered fewer opportunities. Seeing a gap in a woman's resume can trigger these maternal bias and hurt her chances of being hired. Also, that just came to my mind how many times people take a break to explore the world. Nowadays, this is very common. You take a break to live 1 year somewhere, 2 years somewhere, where you be doing maybe some very little remote and virtual work, but you want to explore. And in many environments, many companies, work environments, this gap for exploring, for discovering, is seen in a positive side. So why not seeing women take the break to raise her children, also seen as her good potential as a leader, a responsible leader for taking care of her team when is needed. So the next one goes to meeting dynamics again. So let's see the situation. Your manager schedules a virtual team meeting at an hour when your coworker has blocked off time on her calendar to care for her young children. Why it matters. This can seriously interfere with your coworker's ability to balance work and life. Many people plan ahead with partners or caregivers, and last minute change can be disruptive or impossible. It can also contribute to a feeling of being always on, which more than 30% of employees name as one of the biggest downsides to remote work in 2020. And if situations like this happen often, they can lead to stress or burnout. And here I share something about my own experience, not related to motherhood, but related to the fact of companies expecting you to be 100% available. Nobody should be 100% available. You have a life beyond your company. You have other interests. You have hobbies beside families' responsibilities. My case was I was hired for a um, 20 hours contract in a company. And I talked to my manager and I said, okay, I want to work then in the mornings. All my mornings will be dedicated for you. They didn't want that. They want this to be random, that anytime they would need me, they would contact me and I should be available. And I said, this is not productive at all and not efficient. How can I be just there while I have other clients? How can I be just there available for you and not even knowing when you're going to contact me? And then I have to stop what I'm doing to be available for you. But they insisted and they didn't know, they didn't want that. And I insisted and I said, no, I'm going to be working in the mornings. And it was a disaster because do you know what happened? I kept myself saying, I work in the morning because, and I can report, I can see, I wake in the morning, I see everything that happened in the afternoon, the day before, and then I take action. My position was team coordination for a project with several different languages. I was coordinating the translators for a specific software, the translation for a specific software. But what happened was my manager was a micromanager, and those kind of people that feels they have to take action all the moment. So I was there doing my work in the mornings, but when I would wake up in the morning to do my work, he had answered all the mails or inquiries or requests from people who I had communicated the day before. So people are all over the world. So they will be sending questions and asking, sending information, deliveries throughout the day. And I would, in the morning, look at my mails and then coordinate them and answer all the questions. That was my management plan. But my manager would then, in the afternoon, while I was not available, because I said I was not going to be available, would interfere and answer those questions, transfer emails and files, and it became such a big mess that I could not keep track on everything I was doing. And then this relationship didn't last long. So I was the first position time that I talked to a manager. He said, I was not happy with you. And I said, I'm not happy with you either. So we can all work in this way. It was the first time in my life I had this kind of situation in a company. But I said, I cannot be available 40 hours when I have a contract of 20 hours. So here there are, so the limits and the barriers we have, the boundaries we have to put. And same for maternal bias and all the other bias. We have to be aware and we have to put boundaries. So what do you have to do? Remind your manager of your co-worker's schedule constraint and suggest an alternative time, or the co-worker himself or herself in this case, we're talking about maternal bias, to remind the manager, this, I cannot do this, I have planned this already and I have informed you before, like I did with my manager. You could also mention by how blocking time like this is vital for maintaining work-life balance, and explain that practice like this can help employees be more productive and feel more committed to the company, because everybody is happy to give an extra time when you are given, and the time you need for yourself is given and respected. And when you're doing the work, you will give your best to in that time that is available for you. Everybody who is a responsible employee and leader in their field would do that. So why this control and why this lack of respect in terms of respecting other people's boundaries? And why it happens? This reflects the norm that the ideal worker is always available and doesn't need to take time away from work to care for family, pursue personal interests, or simply recharge. Studies over studies shows that nobody is productive more than 6 hours a day. Nobody. You can. So these extra hours you're doing there, that everybody's there, 2 hours, 4 hours more, 10 hours. Some people, one of my colleagues told me she was working 60 hours per week. And I said, doing what? Because productively, what was exactly the amount of hours where you really, really delivered something related to your work? After that, we cannot. So even like as far as I know, in Sweden, they have implemented this norm. Not sure, we have to check. But that working less, but working focused and really giving your best in those hours. And of course, as I said before, if you need to give some extra hours, you will, because it's your responsibility to get the job done. But being available all the time, I'm not available all the time. And to be honest with you, I don't even have my phone number available. If you want to contact me, you have to email me first. And why I do that is not because I'm arrogant or because I'm full of myself, because I found throughout my years of experience that that is the most effective way. Because if I don't know you and you call me anytime during business hours, you don't really know my business hours, right? So you call me and I am doing something else. And then it will be this conversation. Who? What exactly what? Let me make some notes here. And then how much time is lost just trying to understand who is this person calling you, what they need, and to get into the real conversation. So I have in my contacts, in my social media, everywhere, I have my email. And I have where you can find me online. You can search my profile, you can get to know a little bit more about me, and then you send me an email. Hi, Julia, I'm such and such. This is what I want. Can we have a call? And that is great because then I get to know also, I get to have the opportunity also to search a little bit about you. Nobody's anonymous anymore. Search a little bit about you, and from what you're telling me, what you want to discuss with me, I can prepare myself as well. And when we get into this conversation, I'm telling you, 10-15 minutes is enough for us to get into a conclusion, a solution, a partnership, working together, whatever it is. And everybody is focused and present in that moment. You don't take anybody by surprise. So being available 100% of the time, no, thank you very much. It's not for me and doesn't work. And for you out there, be very careful. Set your standards, because decades of research on the ideal worker show that this norm can harm mothers more than fathers, since mothers often do more caregiving. So you cannot expect any of your employees to be 100% available. Come on, be realistic. Another one in everyday interactions. I have more today, so we're going to be a little bit longer here in our conversation, because I found many situations that affect mothers, and I want to share with you more. Everyday interactions. A colleague doesn't invite a woman on your team to an evening work event. Explain that they assume that the women prefer to be home for dinner with their family. Really? Did you ask her? Did you know exactly her preferences, the way to look after her family? Are you sure? So why it matters? When women with kids are excluded from activities, it can limit their career growth. It can also make them feel isolated from the rest of their team. For companies that care about retaining women, that's a problem. And that's also a problem for women too, because we know that ladies out there, we always talk about women that they have to include networking in their strategic plan for growing their career or business. So if the company itself or the team or colleagues are excluding them, it makes it even more difficult for them to develop this strength in networking and use networking to expand their career and businesses. So what to do? Say, we don't actually know what Mary wants. How about we offer her the opportunity and let her decide for herself? Thank you very much. Consider pointing out the difference in how mothers and fathers are often treated. Do we assume fathers are interested in even events? You can also remind them of the bigger picture. Let's make sure we give the moms of our team the same chances as everyone else. Sometimes they get sidelined. And why this happens? People often assume that once a mother starts a family, she stops being as committed to her job and career. Some assume that she stops having the desire of having a life on by herself, or that her desires, her hobbies, her that she doesn't have any priority anymore in life, priorities that include looking after herself, self-care. And this goes to women out there, mothers. Always give yourself time for self-care. You should be your priority, because this is not about being selfish. It's about self-esteem, self-care. And as I said at the very beginning of this talk today, when moms are not happy, family is not happy either. And if you are frustrated, if you are feeling down, if you are feeling pushed aside at work, or if you feel like that you never have time for yourself, what's going to happen? Your mood, your energy, your strength, it all changes. And these will affect the quality of relationships you have at home and at work. So that's for you as well, to set your boundaries and set priorities that includes self-care. This can lead to generalizations. For example, that moms will say no to stretch assignments, business travel, or invitations to work events after hours. Okay, so this is like some people assume that moms will not do something extra after work because of her house care responsibilities, business travels or invitations. And besides, nowadays with this environment, it became a very good opportunity for women also to be able to do more, to be more present. But be careful, because we talked about this as this is expectation that you always have to be available. The next one, everyday interactions. Let me see here about everyday interactions. Someone complains to you that a new dad on this team is taking too much of his allotted family leave. We talked about this, that men also are penalized for looking after their families. Why it matters, all workers, men too, should be able to spend time with their families, whether that's to bond with new babies, care for sick kids, or be there for aging parents. When workplaces have generous family leave policies, employees are happier, more productive, and more likely to stay on staff. Plus, when men don't use their leave, it makes it harder for women to use theirs without judgment. What to do? Stand up for your colleague on leave. Point out why it matters. How family leave is good for workers, families, and companies. More importantly, remind them that no one should be forced to choose between being a good employee and a good parent. Why it matters. Working fathers can face pushback for spending time with their kids. They tend to receive lower performance in ratings and experience steeper reductions in future earnings than mothers who take the same amount of leave. Much like maternal bias, this pushback is rooted in gender stereotypes. Moms are expected to be more committed to the family and less to their careers. But the reverse is true for fathers. And when they go against that expectation by prioritizing family, they are penalized. So there you go. Next one, reviews and promotions. Someone suggests that a woman on your team be given a big, highly profile project, and a colleague says, I don't think this is a good time for her since she just had a baby. Why it matters? Your company likely wants to retain and promote talented women. Sidelining them, even with good intentions, works against that goal by denying them opportunities that can lead to advancement. So it's always about bringing the facts. You have to see how she performs, and then you judge, not before. What to do? Remind your colleague that this could be a career changing project for whoever gets it. So it's better to let the new mom decide for herself whether or not she wants to take it on. And besides, she is a grown up woman. She doesn't need people to decide for her. Why it matters. Motherhood triggers assumptions that women are less competent and less committed to their careers. As a result, they are held to higher standards and presented with fewer opportunities. We mentioned this before, and we'll keep mentioning it. Studies show that the maternal wall women face when they have kids is the strongest gender bias. There you go. And lastly, for today, everyday interactions. You are in a conversation with coworkers, and someone without children asks a woman with children, how do you manage work and raising your kids? You must be overwhelmed. Mind your business. Why it matters. This question reinforces an often unconscious belief that dedicated mothers can't also be dedicated employees. It's, it also assumes that woman is overwhelmed, which can feel like a judgment on her ability to handle her workload and might lead to her getting passed over for opportunities. If this happens a lot, it can make women feel unsupported as working parents, which can make them more likely to leave the company. What to do? There are a few ways you can respond based on what feels right. You can point out that feeling overwhelmed is something everyone experiences from time to time, whether or not they have kids. You can manage the point, you can make the point that it's not just working mothers who have a lot to manage. I imagine all working parents feel overwhelmed sometimes. And if your colleague doesn't seem overwhelmed to you at all, you could say that too. Why it happens? Many people fall into the trap of believing that women can be fully committed to both work and family. That can fuel a skepticism about women's abilities. Fathers are often exempt from these assumptions. So there you go. Lot to digest today about maternity bias, and for all of us out there, we have to be aware. We have to really to learn about those bias and be attentive to them, and to start working and supporting others when you see happening to your colleague, to your someone in your family, and support them, tell them there are ways to fight those bias. And for me, from my side here, I will continue this conversation with you for the next, this is our day 8th, the 8th day. So we still have 22 to go, but I'm very excited doing this with you here today. All these days, I'm learning a lot. I hope you too. But most important than just becoming aware about biases is to take action. And if you want to learn more, go back to the videos or get back to me. I will be happy to discuss this with you. And I will be bringing more of my amazing professional women leaders in their industries and to discuss their experiences in how they experienced bias and what they did and how much that interfered in their career progress. So tomorrow, see you tomorrow, and where we are going to talk about, I will be talking about affinity bias. Bye for now. Take care.